The surgeon's hands are wrapped in bandages. Both of them, white gauze covering every finger. He holds them in front of him like they belong to someone else. Like they are artifact from a life he no longer has. He is 57 years old. His name is Dr. Richard Chen. And 3 weeks ago, he performed his final surgery. Not by choice, by fate. The disease that has been destroying his nervous system finally reached his hands. The hands that saved over 4,000 lives. The hands that pioneered techniques still used in hospitals around the world. The hands that will never hold a scalpel again. Oprah sits across from him. She knows the basic story. A legendary surgeon forced into retirement by a degenerative condition. A career cut short. A life interrupted. But she does not know what he did with his final surgery. No one does. Until now. Dr. Chen looks at his bandaged hands. He looks at Oprah. "I want to tell you about my last patient," he says. His voice is steady, but beneath it is something fragile. Something that might break at any moment. Oprah nods. "Tell me," she says. Dr. Chen takes a breath. His name was Marcus Williams, he says. He was 34 years old. He was a father of 2. And he needed a heart transplant or he would die within weeks. He pauses. "I had performed over 600 heart transplants in my career. This one should have been routine, but it was not routine. Because the night before the surgery, I received my final diagnosis. I learned that my hands would fail completely within 1 month. This surgery would be my last." He looks at his bandages. "And I had a choice to make," he says. "A choice that still keeps me awake at night. A choice that brought me here today." Oprah leans forward. "What choice?" Dr. Chen looks at her with eyes that hold decades of responsibility. "I could cancel the surgery," he says. "Refer Marcus to another surgeon. Protect my legacy. End my career with a perfect record. No fallos. No complications. Nothing but success." He pauses. "Or I could operate. One more time. With hands that were already beginning to fail. With nerves that could not guarantee precision. With a disease that might manifest during the procedure itself." His voice drops. "I chose to operate," he says. "And what happened in that operating room is something I have never told anyone. Until now." The studio falls silent. And Dr. Richard Chen begins to tell a story that will make Oprah question everything she thinks she knows about courage, sacrifice, and the impossible choices people face at the end of their lives. How do we get here? Rewind 116 minutes. The morning had begun with anticipation. The production team had been working on this episode for months. Dr. Richard Chen was a legend. His innovations in cardiac surgery had saved thousands of lives. His textbooks were taught in medical schools around the world. His techniques had become the standard of care. And now he was retired, forced out by a cruel twist of fate. Progressive peripheral neuropathy, a disease that slowly destroyed nerve function. It had started in his feet years ago, then moved to his legs, then to his arms, and finally, inevitably, to his hands. The hands that had been called the steadiest in surgery. The hands that residents spoke of in hushed tones. The hands that were now wrapped in bandages because they could no longer feel. The production team had expected a story about loss, about a brilliant career cut short, about coming to terms with the end. They got something else entirely. Subscribe and leave a comment because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Dr. Chen had arrived at the studio alone. No publicist, no family, no entourage. Just a man with bandaged hands and a story to tell. He had sat in the green room for an hour without speaking. He had stared at the wall. He had flexed his bandaged fingers repeatedly, testing, remembering, grieving. When the production assistant came to bring him to the stage, he had stood slowly. He had looked at her with eyes that seemed to see something far away. "I need to tell the truth today," he had said. "I need to confess something I've kept hidden for 3 weeks. I do not know if the world will forgive me. But I cannot carry it alone anymore." The assistant had not known what to say. She had just nodded and led him to the stage. And now here he was, facing Oprah, facing 400 people, facing the truth. The night before the surgery, Dr. Chen continued, "I did not sleep. I sat in my office at the hospital and I looked at my hands. I watched them tremble. I felt the numbness spreading. And I knew that I was taking a terrible risk." He looked at Oprah. A surgeon's hands are everything, he said. They are our instruments, our tools, our connection to our patients. When they fail, we fail. And mine were failing. He shook his head. The ethical thing to do would have been to step aside, to let someone else operate, someone whose hands were steady, someone whose nerves were reliable. But I looked at Marcus Williams's file. I looked at the photographs of his children, and I cannot do it. Why not? Oprah asked. Because I had been his doctor for 3 years, Dr. Chen said. I knew his body. I knew his heart. I knew exactly how his anatomy would respond to the transplant. A new surgeon would be starting from scratch, learning his case in hours instead of years. The success rate would drop from 93% to 71%. He looked at his hands again. I convinced myself that my experience outweighed my deterioration, he said, that knowing his body was more important than having steady hands, that I could do what needed to be done even with failing equipment. He paused. I was wrong. Behind the scenes, Oprah made a decision that defied every producer's expectation. She did not interrupt. She did not redirect. She let the silence stretch, because she understood that what was coming next needed space. It needed room to breathe. It needed the weight of everything that had been said to settle before the next revelation landed. Dr. Chen took a breath. The surgery began at 7 a.m., he said. Marcus was prepped. The donor heart was ready. My team was assembled, and I stepped up to the table with hands that I was not certain I could trust. His voice wavered. For the first 4 hours, everything went perfectly, he said. I made every incision. I executed every technique. I was operating at the highest level I had ever achieved. It was like my hands knew this was the end, and they were giving me one final gift. He looked at his bandages. And then, at hour 5, it happened, he said. What happened? Oprah asked quietly. Dr. Chen looked at her. My hands failed, he said. Completely. Without warning. I was holding the donor heart, preparing to place it in Marcus's chest, and suddenly I could not feel my fingers. I could not control my grip. I could not do what needed to be done. The audience gasped. For 37 seconds, Dr. Chen continued. I stood there with a human heart in my hands and no way to place it. 37 seconds of complete paralysis. 37 seconds of watching my career and my patient's life slip away. Oprah's hand was over her heart. What did you do? She whispered. Dr. Chen smiled slightly. I did something I had never done in 31 years of surgery, he said. Something that went against every instinct I had. Something that required more courage than any operation I had ever performed. He paused. I asked for help. This is the moment no one in the studio and no one watching at home ever saw coming. Dr. Chen's voice steadied. Standing next to me was Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, he said. She was my chief resident, 29 years old, brilliant, talented, but she had never performed a heart transplant as the lead surgeon. She had assisted on dozens, but she had never been the one holding the heart. He looked at his hands again, and I turned to her with Marcus's life hanging in the balance. And I said, Sarah, I need you to take over. I need you to finish this surgery. I will talk you through every step, but my hands cannot do it anymore. Yours need to. Oprah's eyes were wide. You handed off the surgery? She asked. In the middle of the procedure? Dr. Chen nodded. It was the hardest thing I have ever done, he said. Harder than any surgery. Harder than my diagnosis. Harder than knowing I would never operate again. Because it meant admitting that I was no longer capable. It meant trusting someone else with a life I had promised to save. It meant letting go. He wiped his eyes. But I did it, he said. I stepped back. I put my hands behind my back. And I watched Sarah Okonkwo perform the most beautiful surgery I have ever witnessed. He smiled through his tears. She was magnificent, he said. Her hands were steady. Her technique was flawless. She did everything I would have done, but with hands that worked, with nerves that fired, with the precision that I had lost. He paused. And for the next 6 hours, I stood beside her and guided her through every step. I was her voice. She was my hands. Together, we finished the surgery. Oprah was weeping now. And Marcus? She asked. Dr. Chen's smile widened. Marcus Williams is alive, he said. He went home to his children 2 weeks ago. His heart is beating perfectly. He has decades ahead of him. And it is because I did the one thing I never thought I could do. What is that? I gave up, Dr. Chen said. I surrendered. I admitted that I was not the hero of this story anymore. I became something else. A teacher, a guide, a voice in someone else's ear. He looked at his bandaged hands. My hands failed, he said, but my knowledge did not. My experience did not. My ability to lead did not. I learned that there is more than one way to save a life. And sometimes the bravest thing a surgeon can do is put down the scalpel. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. Oprah wiped her eyes. There is something I need to ask, she said. You said you kept this hidden for 3 weeks. What exactly did you hide? Dr. Chen's expression shifted. The hospital does not know what really happened, he said. The official record shows that I performed the surgery with Dr. Okonkwo assisting. It does not show that she took over. It does not show that I stepped back. It does not show that for 6 hours, I was nothing more than a voice. Oprah frowned. Why did you hide it? Dr. Chen sighed. Because if the hospital knew, he said, it would raise questions. About protocol, about liability, about whether the surgery was performed properly. And I could not risk that. I could not risk anything that might affect Marcus's insurance coverage or his medical care going forward. He shook his head. But more than that, he said, I was ashamed. I had built my entire identity on being the best, the most capable, the one who never failed. And in my final surgery, I failed. Completely. Spectacularly. I cannot finish what I started. He looked at Oprah. I thought hiding it was the right thing to do, he said. But the weight of that secret has been crushing me. I have not slept in 3 weeks. I have not been able to look at myself in the mirror. I have been carrying this alone because I was too proud to admit the truth. He paused. Until today. Oprah leaned forward. Why today? She asked. Why are you telling this story now? Dr. Chen reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a folded piece of paper. Because I received something yesterday, he said. Something that changed everything. Something that made me realize I had been thinking about this all wrong. He unfolded the paper. It was a letter. Handwritten. Several pages. Marcus Williams wrote me a letter, Dr. Chen said. He does not know about the handoff. He does not know that Sarah finished the surgery. He just knows that he is alive, and he wanted to thank me. He held up the letter. May I read part of it? Oprah nodded. Dr. Chen began to read. Dear Dr. Chen, I am writing this letter with a heart that beats because of you. Not just the new heart in my chest, but everything that led to this moment. The 3 years of care. The countless appointments. The way you always looked at me like I was a person, not a patient. His voice cracked. My children asked me to write to you. The letter continued. They wanted me to tell you what it means to them that their father is coming home. My daughter drew you a picture of a heart with wings. My son wrote you a poem about superheroes. They think you are magic. Dr. Chen wiped his eyes. But I know the truth, he read. I know that you are not magic. You are just a man who dedicated his life to saving others. A man who probably sacrificed more than I will ever know. A man who, for whatever reason, decided that my life was worth fighting for. He looked up, and there's one more part, he said. He found the passage. I heard something, he read. In the operating room. I was supposed to be unconscious, but there was a moment when I was somewhere in between. And I heard your voice. You were talking to someone, teaching them, guiding them. And I remember thinking, even now, even in this moment, he is still helping others learn. Dr. Chen could not continue. His hands shook as he held the letter. He did not know. He whispered. He did not know that in that moment, I was handing his life to someone else. He thought I was teaching. He thought I was still in control. He looked at Oprah. But he was right, he said. In a way he could not have understood. He was right. I was teaching. I was guiding. I was giving Dr. Okonkwo the knowledge she needed to save him. That was my final lesson. My final gift. Not to a patient, but to another surgeon. He folded the letter carefully. That is why I am here, he said. That is why I needed to tell this story. Because I have been thinking about my failure all wrong. I thought stepping back was giving up. I thought asking for help was weakness. I thought my hands failing meant I had failed. He shook his head. But Marcus Williams is alive because I was willing to fail, he said. Because I was willing to surrender. Because I was willing to put my pride aside and let someone else finish what I started. He looked at his bandaged hands. These hands will never operate again, he said. But they already did their most important work. Not by performing surgery, by letting go. Oprah stood. She walked to Dr. Chen. She took his bandaged hands in hers. What you did was not failure, she said. What you did was the opposite of failure. You saved two things that day, a life and a legacy. She turned to the audience. When Dr. Chen stepped back, she said, he did not just save Marcus Williams. He created Dr. Sarah Okonkwo. He proved to her that she was ready. He gave her the confidence she needed to become the surgeon she was meant to be. She looked at Dr. Chen. Is that right? Dr. Chen nodded. Sarah performed 3 more heart transplants on her own in the weeks after Marcus, he said. All successful. She is now the youngest chief of cardiac surgery in the hospital's history. He smiled. She told me something last week, he said. She said that in that moment, when I handed her the heart, she wanted to refuse. She was terrified. But I looked at her with complete calm and complete confidence, and I said, you are ready. I have taught you everything I know. Now use it. He paused, and she did. The episode ended differently than any before. Oprah asked if Dr. Sarah Okonkwo was available to join them. The producer scrambled. Within 30 minutes, Sarah was on stage. She was 30 years old now, poised, confident, accomplished. But when she saw Dr. Chen, she began to cry. She embraced him. She held him for a long time. And then she said something that made everyone understand the true meaning of what had happened. You did not fail that day, she said. You passed the torch, and I have been carrying it ever since. She looked at the audience. Every life I save is because of him, she said. Every surgery I perform is built on his foundation. Every patient who goes home to their family does so because Dr. Richard Chen believed in me when I did not believe in myself. She took his bandaged hands. These hands train mine, she said, and now my hands carry on his work. That is not an ending. That is a beginning. That is how legacy works. Dr. Chen wept. For the first time since his diagnosis, he understood. His career was not over. It was multiplied. Every surgery Sarah performed, every patient she saved, every resident she trained, they would all carry pieces of him. His knowledge, his techniques, his willingness to let go. That was his true legacy. Not the 4,000 lives he had saved directly, but the countless lives that would be saved by the surgeons he had trained, by the knowledge he had shared, by the torch he had passed. The Richard Chen Foundation for Surgical Education was established within months. It provides training and mentorship for surgeons around the world. It funds residency programs in underserved communities. It ensures that Dr. Chen's techniques continue to spread. His hands may be still, but his legacy is anything but. Dr. Chen speaks at medical schools now. He tells the story of his final surgery. He tells future surgeons that the hardest thing they will ever do is not perform an operation. It is step back from one. It is admit that they cannot. It is trust someone else to finish what they started. That, he says, is the true test of a surgeon. Not what you can do, but what you can let go of. Marcus Williams and his family visited Dr. Chen last month. It was the first time they had seen each other since the surgery. Marcus's children ran to Dr. Chen and hugged his legs. They called him their hero, and Dr. Chen knelt down and said something that made everyone cry. I'm not your hero, he said. I am just someone who taught another hero how to save your father. The real hero is Dr. Okonkwo. Remember her name. She is the one who brought your daddy home. The children did not fully understand, but they nodded solemnly. And then Marcus's daughter handed Dr. Chen a piece of paper. It was the drawing she had made. A heart with wings. Flying. Free. Dr. Chen has a frame now. It hangs in his home office. Beside it is a photograph of his bandaged hands. Beneath both is a small plaque. It reads, "Some gifts we give with our hands. Others we give by releasing them." Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story like this. Because there are more heroes waiting to be honored. More sacrifices waiting to be told. More moments when letting go became the bravest choice of all. And somewhere out there, someone is holding on too tight. To a job. To an identity. To a version of themselves that no longer serves. Maybe it is time to let go. Maybe it is time to trust someone else. Maybe it is time to become the voice instead of the hands. That is what Dr. Chen learned. That is what he teaches. That is the gift his failing hands gave the world. Not surgery, something better. Permission. Permission to fail. Permission to ask for help. Permission to step back and let someone else shine. That is true legacy. That is true love. That is true courage.